to everybody to our 30th Creative Conversation. Can you believe that? Where did all those creative conversations go? And just to echo what Linda said, it is a dark and rainy night out there, and we're really, wanting to welcome you. You come into this really cosy environment, don't you, and feel that we can be snug here. So welcome. I know you all had choices of things that to do tonight, and you've chosen to come to Creative Conversations, so we're really delighted about that. We're running Creative Conversations in partnership with Mid and East Lothian, and so welcome to any colleagues that are from across the wider Lothians, and we've been doing that for 2 years. I think we've got a winning formula in terms of Creative Conversations, and you can tell that in a couple of ways. People come and, in large numbers as they have tonight. Other authorities are copying us. Other authorities are starting their own Creative Conversations. That's always nice, isn't it? And people come and say to us, could we have a Creative Conversation on? And name the subject. So people want to use this creative conversation approach around a whole range of different subjects and issues. So we're getting a wide range of people coming, a wide range of different partners and different staff and different agencies, and I think that's one of the joys of Creative Conversations. So you get to network, don't you, and especially over the wine and the canapés, get to chat to people and just get to kind of broaden horizons really and see how things are going on in other parts of the world. And we get the chance to talk about the big questions. I think Linda's got this absolutely right. She manages to pick, doesn't she, the subjects that are the big questions, the things that people think, I'd really like to spend a bit of time talking and listening around that particular issue. And I think she's also got it absolutely right in terms of making this informal, conducive, glass of wine, canapés, so you can actually also enjoy having the conversations, and it's conducive to being creative, a bit of time for us to think and reflect and actually stand back a bit from the kind of day-to-day pace of everything. So I think we've got a really winning formula, and I really do pay tribute to Linda and to her team just for the fantastic work they do in a very quiet, unassuming, just get on with it kind of way, but really would like to say that. Closing the attainment gap and reducing poverty and inequality is absolutely one of the big issues of the moment, and to be honest, one of the big issues not just of this moment but has been around for a long time, and we've not really made very much headway in it. And maybe tonight through the Creative Conversations and the approaches, the kind of informal approaches here, we could actually start to make some real difference around that issue. So that's our focus for this evening, and it's actually a theme that emerges through a whole range of Creative Conversations, so it doesn't really matter which theme you pick. Actually tackling poverty and reducing inequality kind of emerges throughout of those themes, whatever subject it is. We've got a project in Edinburgh called the 1 in 5 Project, and this is about raising awareness of child poverty in Edinburgh and looking at it from an education point of view and looking at the school day and the kind of hidden costs for parents living in poverty of the cost of the school day. And the 1 in 5 Project, people know why it's called 1 in 5 Project? It's a shocking statistic, and when I saw it, it shocked me. 1 in 5 of our children in Edinburgh are living in poverty. So that's kind of, just how, big an issue it is here in Edinburgh at least. So there's a whole range of work going on around the 1 in 5 Project, and it is powerful and it is hard-hitting, and we're absolutely determined to make a difference to children and young people living in poverty, and to look at that through an education lens. And we'll be developing our policies, developing support and guidance, and we're doing that through trying various things out in schools and looking at that and getting feedback. And we've got a conference coming up on that in March the 22nd, just a date for your diary, to get feedback from all the people that have been involved in the pilot projects. So for our conversation tonight, and that's what we're all here for, we wanted to hear from a young person, and a young person that has had recent experience of these issues, is a young father, and for him to share his experiences with us, good and bad experiences, and his aspirations for the future for himself and his family, and especially to tell us what could have helped, What might have helped? What might have made the difference? So we've asked Chris Kilkenny to join us, and we're really, really delighted that he said yes, that he agreed to come. Chris is the youngest creative catalyst that we've ever had here, by quite a long way, actually. Haven't added it up, but...
David's still trying to argue.
So tonight is a first, as well as a 30th. And Chris was a modern apprentice. Actually, just checked with Chris, he was in our very first round of modern apprentices coming into the council, in the Arts and Creative Learning team. And I don't know if Chris knows how much of an impact he had on us and how much we learnt from Chris being involved and working with us. So Chris grew up in care and was also a young carer and lived in poverty and is now a young parent. So, you know, what an amazing perspective. And he's got real insight about telling us what might have helped. But maybe also looking forward what he would like for his own son, Cameron. And he's intelligent, he's brave, he's honest, and he's refreshingly direct. And that's exactly what we want from him. And he looks as though he's blushing a bit as well. So we're really privileged to have him here tonight, and I'm going to hand over now to David and to Chris. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't know. I didn't know that. I didn't know that Chris had called his son after me. Chris, thanks, mate. I'm just so touched because the story I'm going to kick off with, which some people in the audience have heard before, was that when Chris disappeared. Is that okay? Can I say that?
Right.
He was modern apprentice with us. Then he just stopped turning up, basically, and you can attack.
It has that effect on you.
I know. It was after I sent him to get my cable to charge my laptop, and only gave him a £5 for a taxi to hitchhike. It was really damaging for him. Anyway, after he disappeared and I hadn't seen him for ages, I walked into a conference in Dundee, and there he was, and he greeted me very warmly. "Hey, Davey, how you doing?" And I was like, "Oh, fine, Chris, what about yourself?" And he told me he just couldn't hack that Edinburgh stuff, too much stress, and going running around his head, and he just had to let it go. "But I'm all right now," he said. And I went, "Oh, Chris, that's brilliant." He said, "I'm working part-time with Who Cares? It's just sessional, but I love it." And I went, "Chris, that's absolutely brilliant." And then he looks at me.
He's got a good memory for an old geezer.
And then he looks at me and he goes, "And you know what, Davey?" And I went, "No, what is it, Chris?" "I know now what I'm going to do with the rest of my life." And I went, "Chris, that's brilliant. What are you going to do with the rest of your life?" And he goes, "I'm going to do the same as you, Davey. I'm going to talk shite for money." And after that, I'm still having you back. So tonight, we've got him talking shite for money. Not very much money. When we were setting this up...
He's trying to keep me under the poverty line.
I know, and I lied to him as well. I promised him we'd take him out for dinner, and we've said no more about it.
He's brought an egg sandwich in his bag.
It was from a meeting I was at earlier. So when we were planning this, we had a conversation. So we got together in the Fruit Market Gallery like we were truly middle class. And we all sat around the table and ate polenta cake, even though we didn't know what polenta was. And we drank coffee, except Chris doesn't drink coffee because his body is a temple. I
didn't eat the polenta cake either.
You didn't eat the polenta cake either. What did you have?
Well, I was going to have chocolate cake, but the woman dropped it on the floor.
I was same line as like me kicking over your tea. So we had the conversation, and I have to say honestly, I've no idea what he's going to say tonight, but it was a conversation which really touched me, and it's one that I've quoted a number of times in conversations with other people. I found what Chris had to say really, really powerful. And I do worry that we spend so much time letting other people tell us what we should do with young people. We had Martin Robinson at the last creative conversation, a man who was so intellectually demanding that at least 2 people left early bleeding from their ears because part of their brain had exploded during the course of the presentation. And Martin assured us that it was all about the grammar, and we had to really teach children very rigidly, and it was out of constraints came creativity. And other folk in the audience were saying, no, we have to give children freedom. And we'd had Howell Roberts here, and Howell was saying we need to let people imagine their way up and then engineer their way back down, so they do the learning in the way down rather than the way up. And we've got all sorts of people, very good people, very bright people, but essentially all pontificating about what should work for him. Right? So we felt it was maybe a bit time that we let somebody come along and talk about what would work for me rather than talk about what would work for them. So basically, that's what he's going to do tonight. He's got a script, which we've never had before. I didn't even know you could write. I'm really impressed. I think that's really good.
Fucking goes on about that guy, yeah.
I'm just trying to big you up before you start. So he's got a script. So Chris will start off with that, and then basically after that, what we want to do is have a conversation. If there are things that he hasn't pulled out in today's talk that he pulled out in the Fruit Market Cafe. I'm using the term pulled out in the loosest possible sense, but never he. So if there's things he doesn't pull out in that, we'll engage in that around the conversation. But actually, we want you to engage as well, because it's not often we get this opportunity. And the last thing I'm going to say is that one of the reasons we wanted to have Chris is because he's not a fairy story, right? You know, I think that the typical thing that we get is we get people whose lives have been transformed, people who are looked after and have become fantastic successes. They're millionaires, they're running companies, they're doing whatever. And what we spoke about when we spoke to Chris is he's getting by. He's getting by. His life's no changed. He hasn't become a movie star. He's not making millions, but he's getting by. He's keeping on the right side. And he's doing that for himself, and he's doing it for his partner, and he's doing it for his kid. And so it's not a transformational model, and it's not some fairy tale story about somebody's success and transformation. It's just about somebody who's moved from a situation where getting by was a real challenge. And it's about modern poverty. You know, when Gillian was talking about living in poverty, one of the things we need to understand is we need to understand what modern poverty is. I was working in Hutchison's grammar school in Glasgow recently, and I was looking around all of the things that they had in the school, all of the displays that they had, and my God, you know, I think they had a permanent booking and a flight to Malawi. You know, Malawi must be love-bombed by people from Scotland going out and showing that we care. And people are forever flying out to places like that because we can understand that poverty. And the fact that it's so much more distant from being something that we share or something that we might contribute to. And in a weird way, Malawi's a safe poverty because we go as missionaries, not as neighbours. And my question to the staff at Hutchison Grammar was, have you ever taken kids to Springburn? And that's one of the points. It's easy to understand that kind of third world poverty and material deprivation. A lot of the time when we look at young folk that live in the same area as Chris does, and Chris will maybe touch on and talk about this, they've still got the trainers, they've still got the super dry, they've still got the badges, they've still got the brands, they've all got a flat screen telly, which allows people like the other David Cameron to talk about how there's no real poverty, and we can cut back in benefits, and we can cut back in tax credits, and we can do all of that because that's not poverty that hurts. And we need to get an understanding that because of the proximity, the relationship and the responsibility, the poverty that people are experiencing, 1 in 5 in the city of Edinburgh, is as damaging and as corrosive as anything anyone's experiencing in Malawi. So Chris, over to you, mate. Take us through it.
Does this work? Oh, it does.
Yeah.
Oh. Goes on a wee bit, hasn't it? I'm surprised he can keep up for his age. I'm just going to read it off a bit of paper because my head's not as expanded as his. It's huge. Needs that big toupee to keep it all hidden. I'm just going to start. I just wrote it down. It's easier for me to read what I wrote because if I tried to think about it all, we'd be here all day. So, poverty and disadvantage. To me, the jargon of decision makers and the image of adverts. What do you think? What do you imagine when you hear those words? Do you imagine the poverty-ridden cries for help that we see on television every day from charities like the Red Cross and Save the Children? I would have if you asked me when I was at school. I'm sure like the majority of people in the world, you all see the adverts and you wish there was something you could really do to help, actually directly do, not just donate money. David is right. If you're expecting a tale from me where a young person comes from great adversity and hardship to overcome all their issues with one single defining action, you're in the wrong room. You're best just head down and go for a coffee. I even made it rain so it was depressing before you even came through the door. I'll start off by telling you where I was and who I am. My name's Chris. I recently turned 21. I've never been a drug addict, but I've been in rehab twice before I was 12 years old. I live with my 2 brothers and my sister and our mum in Wester Hailes, which is a part of Edinburgh, which most of you will know. The large amount of the populace are beneath the poverty line. I then spent 3 years in a young people's centre, or a care home, as some of you might know it. And my siblings were fostered and still are to this day. I was myself moved into my own flat in the Calder high-rise flats on the 9th floor. I used to call it the penthouse of paradise. For many of my childhood years before I went into care, I witnessed a lot of drink and drug misuse, physical and domestic abuse, death. When I think back to my childhood, the strongest feelings I can remember are being hungry and sad. I want you to keep in mind that during my time in primary and high school, all this stuff was happening. I also want you to keep in mind that these circumstances are not unique. Although it may seem like a horror story, it is not one of a kind. If you are a teacher in a school or a nurse in a hospital or even a professional who works in an office, it's very likely that there are pupils, young people, or even apprentices that are suffering from issues like this. They may not reveal them. They may, as I did, put on a front. They may lie to protect their true identity. They may act out and joke and try to be the centre of attention. To the untrained eye, they may just seem highly disruptive and problematic. What you all must remember at the end of tonight is that sometimes the best place for a young person to hide is in plain sight. I'll tell you where I am today. This is the part where you find it's not a fairy tale. I'm 21 years old. I've been out in the big scary world for 5 years now. I've got my own child with my partner who's almost 2 years old. My child, not my partner. We all live in a 2-bedroom flat in Wester Hailes, 50 steps from my childhood home. Although there are no drugs, alcohol, violence or anything like that, my young family still struggles and is impacted by the events of my childhood and education. Every week I struggle to feed and protect my young family. I've had a few jobs, I've been an apprentice, I've had a few other jobs, skittered about, been here and there. And I've always worked or done something since I was 16, but I'm by no manner or means settled or secure. I didn't get much in the way from school, like qualifications, because my last year was attendance-wise non-existent, and that's your exam year. I do consider myself as fairly bright and genuinely do enjoy learning. I think I was capable of achieving a lot more from my education. I also believe if this was the case, my employment prospects now would be a lot better, and at this point in time I would no longer be forced to live in the scheme from which I was brought up, or would at least feel like I had opportunities and paths available that could light the way out. My honest opinion of how I feel today, tired, exhausted of fighting. Some days are better than others, but I genuinely fear for my young family because so many years of fighting and struggling to get by, I feel like it's going to be like that for the next 60 years. I fight to get the basics and want to make it clear I'm not talking about luxury holidays or materialistic things. I'm talking about feeding, heating and clothing my young family. Although I do just get by and manage, it is, as you will agree, no fairy tale ending to the story. I'm still beneath the poverty line, and as it stands today, I do not find myself any more confident that I will beat the cycle and come out of the other side. I'm still looking for that chance and for that opportunity in life, and hopefully I'll find it. Now talk about my education. I'll start from the beginning. I was a pupil at Clonstone Primary School. My memories there are happy and carefree. Me, my brothers and my sister would look forward to going to school. I used to play football on the football pitch every morning, noon and night, and laugh with my mates the same as most young kids did. And I used to get a school dinner, which was the best thing. So there was nothing not to enjoy about primary school at that time. At this point in life, at home was pretty bad. I used to dread the holidays as it was most likely mean one of two things. I would be hungry and I would have to spend time at home with my mum. Firstly, it would mean, I remember being jealous a lot at school as well. I always used to see kids getting to go to football teams or rugby teams and boxing, school camps, after school clubs, or even having clean clothes and clean uniform. All things that came as part of education, yet I was being told I couldn't do them because my family had no money. By the time I got into high school, I had social work involvement at home, and my school were at least part aware of my circumstances. I was at this point getting to school by a taxi from a rehabilitation centre at the other end of town where my mum was detoxing from heroin. Me and my sister stayed with her here as it was deemed safe by social services. My brothers were temporarily fostered until the process was complete. I was starting to find school hard, not academically, as I felt I was smart enough, but my ability to concentrate was being affected. I had so many things on my mind 24/7. How would my mum be when I got home? Were my brothers okay in their foster placement? Who would be waiting for me at the gates after school? I was starting to struggle in classes and get in trouble for being disruptive. Still, nobody would ask how I felt or if I was okay. I was just a disruptive student. Things went on like this for a while. 2 stints in rehab and 2 relapses later, we were back at square one in Wester Hills. Gradually, my work became worse and my attitude and behaviour towards school became bitter. I had started to resent and even blame school and the system for my situation. Looking back at this, it was wrong, but I felt invisible. I felt like nobody actually cared about me or where I ended up, and I no longer had school to look forward to as I did in primary. I still envied the people in my classes. They got to do things I by now knew not to even ask for. I remember distinctly to this day the painful embarrassment of turning up to hospitality classes without the money required to pay for the ingredients. I used to enjoy that subject, but knew not to take it in 3rd year because it was not free. My last straw at school was a moment that I'll tell you about. I look upon it now with no bitterness, but at the time felt extreme anger and embarrassment as it caused me 2 years of relentless bullying at 3 different schools, and along with everything else, eventually led to my decision to drop out before my exams. Whilst in the rehabilitation centre, a documentary was made about children in poverty and was shown on daytime TV. Nobody from my school watched it and nobody realised I was in it. It was called The Wrong Trainers, Chris's Story. It detailed how poor my family was and highlighted problems about children in poverty and the struggle that we suffered on a daily basis. It was part animation and partly filmed. To my horror, about a year later, I went into a modern studies class after lunch to find the TV set up and the teacher holding the DVD in his hands. The Wrong Trainers. I begged and pleaded with him not to show it as discreetly as I could without alerting the rest of my class. I told him it was about me and told him what would happen if he showed it to the class. He shrugged me off as a class clown who was just having a laugh. The next 45 minutes was the worst 45 minutes of my life. The next day I would find out it was shown in every modern studies class in the school. Nobody asked how I felt or even thought for 1 second I could be telling the truth. They thought I was joking, apart from every young person in my school who had now branded me as a junkie from rehab. Granted, the school's act of showing the film wasn't to purposely hurt me, and ironically was trying to educate my fellow pupils about poverty in the UK. But as I tell you this story as it highlights a point. Even when a teacher was teaching about poverty, they thought it was more plausible that I was joking than that I was actually suffering from severe poverty and the scene of a documentary. Never did anyone think that one of their own pupils could be living in such hardship and poverty. The unfortunate truth is, we all think like this on some level. We hear about poverty and disadvantage and we associate it with the adverts on the telly or what the media shows us. But the truth is, a quarter mile away from the very wealthy estate of Collington Village lies the suburb council estate of Wester Hills, where extreme poverty exists, and this is the case all over the UK. This is, however, a silver lining, because this isn't just some story on the telly, and you can do something to directly help. Here are a few things I can personally ask as a young person that would have directly made a difference, even if only a minuscule one. Any difference is better than no difference, and that one thing you do may be the trigger for a young person to spur on and seek help, or even give them the confidence to fight the adversity and be the fairy tale ending that you were hoping for today. If you work in a school or somewhere that provides education, ask yourself the question, are your opportunities in education really free? If the answer is no, I implore you to act. If you work in a job that encounters young people, look out for the signs, and even if there are none, what harm will it do to you to ask that young person once a day how they are doing and if they are okay? Don't let any young person fade away into the back of a class and be invisible. No matter how much we might hide, we all want to be seen. And most of all, if you come across a young person who is struggling or is acting out, always remember they might be down, but with your help, they're never out. Well, I was going to fall asleep.
Well done. Just before I open it up, one of the things I want to ask Chris about, because it was a point that you missed, and one of the things that I was really struck by when we spoke before was when you talked about knowing that you wanted to go to another school as you were getting to the end of primary, and you were talking about that, and then you talked about your first 2 years in the school that you got into. Do you want to just say a bit about that, Chris? Because I thought that was really impressive.
Well, I remember when I was coming to the end of primary school, I always used to think I was getting like primary 6, primary 7, and by this time I sort of knew the area I was in wasn't as... I sort of knew I wouldn't have as great a chance if I was going to a school in that area if I went to another school. So I basically begged Mum to try and enrol me in a different school rather than the WEC, which sounds bad because the WEC's just as good a school as any, but that was the viewpoint I had at primary 6, primary 7 age. So by the time I came to primary 7, I end up going to get to go to another school. In the first couple of years at the school, before, like, even when stuff was happening, one of the worst years, things in that were a bit better, and I thought maybe I might have a chance until everything sort of got worse. And
that was the lead up to the film and the showing of the film in the Modern Studies class. And I guess the point that I really wanted to make about that was that, you know, you had that ambition even from an early stage, and you had that attitude that whatever happened, you wanted to be a survivor.
Aye. Well, nobody wants to struggle forever. You know, even when you're that young, even talking like 10, 11, 12 years old, I can remember like feeling sad, like really hard times, and thinking I don't want to live like this when I'm older. So even at that age, I thought, how can I was trying to look for like ways out, even at like 10, 11, even like younger, 9, 10, 11, 12, I was trying to think of ways to get out, ways that we could get out of the scheme out of Wester Hailes. I used to blame it on the area, because I can remember no staying in Wester Hailes and then my mum moving to Wester Hailes, and I associated Wester Hailes with my mum becoming a drug addict and violence and abuse and death and all these sort of things. So even at that age, I used to think, oh, I need to get out of here somehow, even at like 8, 9, 10, 11 years old. So my way was, let's go to a better school in a different area. So I just think, what sort of school can I get in there? And for a wee while, I was sort of, that illusion worked for me, because it kept me having a wee bit of hope that I could still get out, I could get out of the cycle. I thought by myself, at 10, 11 years old, if I go to the right school and stick in and do the right thing, I can get out. It doesn't matter what's going on in my life, I can just shut out. Obviously, it's impossible, near enough impossible. You can't just shut out everything that's happening here. But that's how I used to look at it. I still look at it like I still try to look for ways out, and I still stay. Just when I open my window, I see my old house, and sometimes it's painful. But that's where I had to take a flat when I got my kid. And sometimes I used to promise myself when I was like that age, if I ever had a kid, I'd never stay in Wester. I used to say to myself, I would never bring my kids here if I ever had a kid. And now I'm 21 years old. It's not a fairy tale. I'm living there now. Obviously, my life is a lot better than it is, and his life is nowhere near what mine was like. And he has everything, and I always make sure that I do enough to make sure there's food on the table and there's heating on it. It's never like what it was like when I stayed with my mum, but at the same time, I'm still below the poverty line. I'm still trying to fight away, and I have been for the last sort of 10 years, maybe longer.
And one of the other things that you spoke about, which again I was really struck by, was, as I was remembering it, the Bright House cash generator. Go and say a bit about that.
I used to say, if you look, the thing I was saying to David, I've got a good perception in my area, because I've stayed in Wester Hailes a long time, almost over 15 years. And I look at my area, and when I walk about, even when I take my little boy to nursery, or if I go to the park, we can't really go to the park at Mabbott, because it's just that the whole area is that run down. But when you go to the shopping centre at Wester Hailes, and if you go to the shopping centre, if you go to the streets to go shopping in Morningside, if you go to the shopping centre in Wester Hailes, he was talking about this modern poverty where everybody has a flat screen telly and an iPhone. And the real David Cameron, or the worst David Cameron, whatever you want to call him, sits and talks in the telly about cutting the tax credit snap, because he doesn't see people really are in poverty. People do have iPhones and flat screen tellies and materialistic things, but especially in my area, in the shopping centre, there's two bookies to take these guys, maybe only get £55 a week or whatever it is, they get on job seeker allowance to support them and their kid. And most of the people think, oh, we've not got enough, so we may as well get rid of it anyway, or maybe get gambling addiction, so they'll spend it there in the 2 or 3 bookmakers that are in one shopping centre. They've maybe got a couple of low-priced food stores, and then you've got a cash generator, and you've got a bright house. A bright house where you can go if you've got really, you want to buy a telly and be paying £2,000 for the next 4,000 years, and then 2 weeks later, when you realise you've got no money, you can take that telly that you've been paying up for the next 10 years to cash generators and sell it for 20 quid, because these type of companies, they know to put these shops in this area to take advantage of these people that are staying here, because they know they've got nothing. They know that they're always going to need help from somewhere, and nobody else is going to help them. So you've got these companies taking advantage of disadvantaged people. And I think that when we look at poverty and disadvantage, especially in areas like this, if it was up to me, I'd ban bookies, I'd ban cash generators, I'd ban anybody that takes a disadvantage of people who, I mean, it's like if you go out in the street and you see these adverts on the telly and you see these people that are starving in different countries, it's like going up to these starving kids and saying, I've got a sandwich, and scanning it right in front of them. That's what all these companies and these, like your bright houses and your cash generators and your bookies and these areas where nobody's got anything and they're just looking to take from the poorest in society, and our government lets it happen. If you go into like the likes of Morningside or wealthy areas, you didn't see bright houses and cash generators and loads of bookies on every corner. I mean, the bookies, I mean, they're everywhere now, but if you didn't see as many of these places. And I used to think to myself, why is that? Why is it in the nicer areas that the rubbish companies aren't there? It's because they know they can't take advantage of these people that are staying here, because they've got enough already to survive. And you've got these companies who are taking advantage of people that are disadvantaged in the places that they know that people are going to have to come to them. They're preying on them. They're like capitalists just waiting to make money off people who have got nothing. And that's how I always seen my area, and I still do. I still see it like that. But I seen it even at a young age. I used to start thinking that. Why is because I would see my mum doing these odd mad things. When we got a telly one day, and then the next week she'd go and sell the telly, and I'd be like, what's the point? It's like it's set up for that. The bright house is right next to the cash generators. I was like, they've only moved there because they know that there's one right next door. The cash generators only moved right there because they know they're just going to be buying all the stock for next door the week after people get it, and then the people are still left with these big, massive amounts of debt that they can never afford. And that's why I wanted to try and get out when I was younger, because I knew that not only was my mum a drug addict and was the area really bad, but I knew that I was in an area where the prey society was, everybody was going to be preying on me if I stayed there, because I was disadvantaged and I had not much.
And I mean, one of the other things, and I'll open up in a minute, but one of the other things, again, that I actually really admire about you is that, I mean, one, you're totally unafraid at a certain level. I mean, you talked about all the fears you have about your family and your future and all of that kind of stuff, but you've never had any difficulty abusing me, you know. You've never had any difficulty from day one giving me the most abject abuse right, left and centre, and in a weird masochistic way. I love that. I love the fact that you're prepared to do that, and I love the fact that you're prepared to take things on, and you've got that ability. You know, I think unusually for lots of young people in your circumstances, you've got that ability to pass. You can move into a company like this, and you'll be able to go and talk to people at the back of the room. You'll be able to chat with folk. You'll speak to Gillian. You know, you'll speak to anybody, and you've got that ability. Your speech, the bit that you wrote down, some of that was beautiful. I mean, there were phrases in there that I just wanted to pick out and tweet. And as you know, I'll do that later. Only when I do, I'll say I made them up. But, you know, you've got that ability, and you've got that capacity to actually see and analyse the world in a way that's really striking. What could we have done to take all of that stuff that you've got? You know, an 8-year-old boy sitting thinking, I know how I need to turn my life around. I know what I need to do about it. This is not good enough for me. How did we take a boy that's got all that you've got, and I guess some of it you've got as a man, but you had some of that as a boy. How did we take that and fail to translate that into an education for you?
There's no a magic. It's like, we could come here and we can talk. There's not a magic cure. There's no one serum you can stick in my drink and everything when I was that young would have been solved. I mean, there's a variety of different things, but I think that when you're at school, there's, especially with the large number of people in classes and small amount of staff, it's easy for people to just slip by. And like even now, like when I see even when you're going out and you see people and you speak to people, you could quite easily speak to somebody and think that person must have a. I mean, you make assumptions about somebody when you speak to them straight away. You think, well, I speak to David and I think he's a prick. Right?
Why change the habits of a lifetime?
Like you speak to people straight away and you sort of imagine what sort of life they'd have just by the way they speak, or by the sort of attitude they have. So if someone's sort of has a laugh here, and they seem quite upbeat about life, you think they must have an all right life. Okay, there mustn't be too much going on at him. And when you look at like young people now, I find quite a lot of the young people that, especially in a lot of different things I've done, I've came across a lot of young people that are from care homes or from really bad backgrounds, and I always find that those are the ones that are quite positive and quite confident, in the ones that are quite, because they've been bashed about it so much. Sometimes it's the complete opposite. Sometimes it can be really hard. But quite a lot of young people I've met, they've been through some really tough shit, and they're confident about going to be able to do something for themselves. And if somebody spoke to them that never knew they were from a disadvantaged background, they would never know. You would never be able to tell. And we're not walking about with the things. I don't know what that game is, where it says on the top of your head where you come from and who you are. So that there's not an exact way, but it's just to be open-minded. Everybody is different. Loads of stuff can be happening at home. And for just to try and help. I mean, it doesn't take much for every day. Like if you work in a school, or I mean, I know you're going to see a couple of hundred people a day, but if there's certain people, just to ask them if they're all right, just to say, are you okay? What's happening? Like, what's happening at home? Or just ask them a question, or maybe just to take 30 seconds of your day just to converse with them, and maybe just to actually. Because, I mean, it's easy just to see someone when you're talking at the front of the class and then stick their hand up and say a funny answer and get on the rest of the day, or to have a conversation. But to actually sit face to face and talk to them for 30 seconds, you can learn a lot from a person when you just ask them if they're all right. You get a lot, the telltale signs coming out. But, I mean, there's no, like, an exact cure. I mean, there's loads of different people like me, and there's loads of different, I mean, early intervention, that's like the massive thing. Getting it in their young families before anything happens, and try and prevent the matters before anything actually goes down. But
one of the things I loved about that, when we spoke about it before, was, and you didn't say this, but in my head, I loved the idea of the secret code, which was, you know, you talked about just wanting somebody to say to you, how you doing? You all right? But the secret code part was, you knew that behind that they understood something about you and about your circumstances. And it only needed to be a conversation if you wanted it to be a conversation. You know, I thought that idea was really powerful, that just that small question and knowing what lay behind it.
I think you're right. It's just, I mean, someday, a young person, you're not just going to ask them if they're all right, and they're just going to open up and tell you everything about the whole life. But if I remember when I was younger, I used to feel like nobody, like teachers and that would give me in trouble, or they'd speak to me and say, I just think this person doesn't give a fuck about me. They just say, I used to, even at a young age, I used to think, I'm just another person that's pissing them off because they can't get the work done, or I'm just another person. I never used to feel like anybody actually cared like what was happening in my house. Even social workers and that would never come up to do so. I never used to think this person actually really cares about what's happening. It was a very, I maybe met one or two people where I thought this person actually is going home and maybe thinking what's happening. Obviously, that's wrong. Loads of people would actually care, but I never actually felt like it. And a big thing that would have made a difference to me was just somebody asking me or saying to me, are you all right? Or like the thing with the DVD, I always stuck in my mind for years. I used to hate that teacher. I used to. Now, I know it was just a mistake, but back then I remember telling him, and I was a bit of a class clown. And I said to the guy, I was like, that's me in that DVD. I was like, didn't try to say it as quiet as I could because I'm right in front of the class. So didn't show it. And then he showed it, and immediately after it was like, oh shit. And then I went home, and the next day it had already been showed to all the modern studies classes. And I used to think, why did this guy not just take 10 seconds of his day, just to think maybe it's like the 10th man. If there's 10 men and 9 men all come to the same conclusion, it's due to the 10th man to believe the completely outrageous and plan for it. It was like, why did this guy not just take 10 seconds just think maybe there is actually something else going on? It's the same with if you're in a school and you're a teacher. I mean, it might seem like it's not plausible, it might seem outrageous, and it might seem like a horror story, but it could be happening. So maybe it's just taking 10, 20 seconds of your day, just think, what could I do to maybe see if it is, or just to ask him if he's all right, to put the option out there to speak if you want it.
Anybody else want to ask anything or raise any points or anything with Chris? Yeah. Oh, sorry, you got another one.
I wouldn't ask my question.
Here we go.
I was just wondering, I'm a secondary school teacher, so I would have been like one of the teachers you would have been going round. Would you have been happy for all your teachers, had your circumstances come out sort of thing, to one of them or something? How would you have felt about the rest, like all your teachers knowing or the rest of them? Would you rather just kept it?
At the time, I probably would, if somebody had asked me, I probably would, I didn't want everybody knowing about me. But I think that it's necessary for everybody to know. Especially if it's at that stage, like when I was in a care home, I was living in a rehabilitation centre, especially when it's that bad, I think it would have been, I think there has to be a certain stage where you draw the line and you say, everybody needs to kind of know what's happening, or at least on some level know what's happening here. I know, like, at school, if you had asked me back then in first or second or third year, I would have said, no, I didn't want all the teachers getting about me and being asked and about my life. But I think that, looking back on it now, it would have benefited me greatly for that, especially that teacher to have known, because straight away would have said, right, no, kind of if he said that, then it obviously is. Or people would have been like that. They could have been a bit more understanding when I was maybe misbehaving or acting up. They would have had a wee bit more knowledge into why I was doing it, because probably none of the teachers did know, because it was just your sort of learning support teacher that would really know about you. So I think it probably, at a certain stage, it needs to, if there is information about a young person, I think it needs to be kept discreet. You can't have the teachers running about and saying it in front of other students and that, but I think that everybody should really be in the loop, especially if they're in your age, so they can know, so they can help you. It's not, looking back on it now, it's not so they can know everything about you. It's genuinely so they can help make your education suit you better.
Yeah. The reason I'm asking is just because as a class teacher, you sometimes get bits and pieces about pupils, but then you don't always get the whole picture, and I don't know whether we want the whole picture all the time or not, or what sort of thing. But so you get wee bits, but sometimes you think, oh, just tell me, and then it's all that only certain people know, and you're kind of like you see.
I think there should probably be, when it's like that, if what would probably be beneficial when I was at school would, for my learning support teacher, all my teachers, to have sat down in a room and went, right, this is the plan, this is what's happening. They might not need to know everything, but this is the plan, this is what's happening. He's got this going on in his life, this is what will benefit him best. Watch it from here, maybe ask him how he's doing here. To every single person that was going to be my teacher, it would have been a 10-minute meeting, and maybe an actual written down plan. It could have been quite useful.
How do we earn your trust? You know, because I think that part of that is about this whole idea of you don't want people to know if they're going to use it against you. You know, it's a bit like that. I mean, one possible human reaction to watching that DVD was to go, God, Chris's life's even worse than mine. Because, you know, let's face it, you didn't get out of Wester Hales and go to Eton. You know, you went to Tynecastle, you went to a school that's got a mixed catchment area. You know, it's not a school that's characterised by being exceptionally middle class or anything. And other people might have looked at that and thought, yeah. And I think part of the worry is that you don't want folk to know that stuff about you if they're not going to treat that information with respect. And it's the worry in some instances, isn't it? I think that somebody's going to pick up on that, and then instead of it becoming a help to you, it becomes something that can be used, and you get that. Well, what else do you expect for that Chris Kilkenny? Eh? I mean, you know about his mum. So how do we win your trust around that as educators?
I think that's not something a young person can really help. I think that's down to being professionalism as a teacher, and you shouldn't really be a teacher if you're going to have that attitude. Really, I think like you've got that many years of training and education to become a teacher, and all the education that you have before you go into your education to become a teacher, that you should develop the mindset before you even get to actually in a classroom having that sort of sensitive information given to you, that you should be just looking to help everybody. You should never be looking to blame as a teacher, looking to say, oh, but you know that's why he's not achieving because he's got that. You should be, by the time you're a teacher, I reckon every single person that's having that sort of contact with a young person or any sort of children should have the mindset that they want to help everybody, no matter what the situation is, no matter who they are or what you want to everybody achieve the exact highest level, no matter who they are or how or what their circumstances are.
Okay. Anyone else want to come in? Yep.
Do you want to come and work in our school? I don't really have a question. I just want to say how inspirational I found what you've been saying, and that I recognise what you're talking about in a lot of the kids that I work with, and that just to let you know, I suppose that I try, and lots of us try and do our best, and we hope that that'll make a difference. So, but it's really like, thanks for speaking to us.
Sorry.
Anyone else want to come in? Man there. Take the microphone.
Willie French, head teacher at the Royal High Primary School in Edinburgh. David, I'd be interested to hear your take on this, although I kind of slightly know a bit of your take on this, so it's maybe a bit of a biased question. But Chris, I'd be interested in your opinion here as well. It strikes me that we've been listening to a lot that revolves around equality, and maybe more specifically equity, actually. And the two words that spring to mind about that are ready and able. And our education system, which hasn't changed since around about 1870, has this presumption that every child is ready to start primary school between the age of 4.5 and 5. So immediately, guys like Chris are entered into an uneven playing field. Now, I know that everybody's heard, ad nauseum about Nordic, Scandic, and specifically the Finnish model of education. And I don't think you can replicate that, because those countries have a different social and justice system and a different culture. But I do wonder, do you think, this is for you, David, do you think in our lifetime sitting here, politicians will ever have an appetite to look at changing the structure of education, where perhaps between the age of 3 and 7, we maybe have a different approach, so that guys like Chris, who are coming from very, very disadvantaged backgrounds, are actually ready to start learning, and perhaps in the longer term have a better chance of good social, emotional wealth. And Chris, I just wonder if you think perhaps that, maybe if you hadn't been asked to sit a baseline test at the age of 4.5, and maybe, started learning some early numeracy and early literacy when you were between the age of 6 and 7, and you were more ready, whether that would have made a difference to your longer life chances.
When I was younger, I can never remember. I always felt like I felt when I was like really young, like I can remember, I always felt I was smarter than everybody else, like the young people in my. I never felt like I was any less smarter than any other people in my class. I never felt like I was academically no capable compared to some of my classmates. I maybe, like what you were saying there, emotionally, probably might have benefited me a wee bit more for it to have been means tested rather than just everybody just goes at the same age and everybody just fires up. But I mean, when it was that young, I don't know, I can't really remember back that far, but for me personally, I don't think I don't know what difference it would have made for me to have started school maybe a wee bit later and have done things a wee bit different, unless the emotional supports were there right the way through school. I think that the emotional supports for like young people needed to be there right for the start, right for the early years. Right, if I had been emotionally supported for 4.5, right the way till I reckon I would have completed school, completed my hires, and positive I would have maybe just been about to finish a degree in something at university because I felt I was that smart. But I just wasn't emotionally capable to handle being bullied at school and going into school with all these problems in the back of my head and trying to sit. I used to struggle sitting. I could learn, like I felt like I was quite smart, and I used to enjoy learning. I used to love history and English and maths, and I actually used to enjoy going to classes. And I can remember some of the other young people in my class used to hate going to school. I actually used to enjoy learning, but I couldn't learn because I couldn't physically sit at the table and listen to what the guy was saying because I used to have that many thoughts going on in my head. So I don't know if it would have made a difference because I'm too young to remember back that far. But it's definitely I think it needs to change the education system because it is almost medieval. I don't know. Probably better for David to answer that question because he's more for that time.
Cheers, mate. I mean, I think it's been really one of the really interesting things in listening to you is that when you've talked about schooling, the only thing you've talked about is care. You know, the only thing you've talked about is regard, and absolutely nothing at all in Chris's presentation about approaches or how he was taught or how the curriculum was delivered, or subjects. You've mentioned a few subjects. And I think there's something enormously powerful about that, because I think the sense that I get at the moment is that we're obsessed now with attainment. And it's absolutely fascinating that we've now got Nicola Sturgeon and the Tory boy whose name I've forgotten, because contrary to Chris's belief, my brain's not that big, but the whole idea of tackling the underlying causes of poverty and looking at educational attainment as a cause of poverty rather than a symptom. And as soon as you get into that objective of chasing attainment, you begin to chase formal achievement. And if you're chasing formal achievement, the logic of that is that you lapse into formal context in terms of how you get people to learn. And, you know, without thinking about it all the time, as you're talking about sitting there. You know, I was just sitting there, and when I kicked off, and when I did, and it's all about that sense of formal order, and we get into that sense of rigidity. And I love what you talked about readiness and ability. And I think the idea that we can accelerate learning if we've done the preparation properly for that learning to take place. You know, if you look at the research, young people who begin to read formally at age 9, as opposed to your point about exploring early literacy, catch up very, very quickly with children who begin their formal learning at the age of 5. And the idea of looking at that structure, I think, is hugely, hugely important. And the idea of the obsession with age rather than stage of development, you know, I think is something singularly unhealthy. I think the idea that we label people on the basis of data manufacture, as Ken Robinson has it, I think is something that we really need to begin to question. Because undoubtedly, you know, I mean, you're talking about Chris coming into a level playing field, and I was nearly saying one of the issues, of course, was you couldn't get on the playing field anyway, because you couldn't afford to buy the boots. And it's that idea that we place people at a disadvantage. Tim Brighouse's comment that he makes consistently, it's bad enough if people fail to learn. It's absolutely unacceptable if they learn to fail. And putting people into that situation where they're exposed to that failure against a standard over which they've got no control from the earliest stage, the idea of lock and label, you know, you had a test, here's what we can expect of you in terms of value added. We need to move away from that. Do I think politicians have got the appetite for it? I hope that they will eventually come to it, because I hope they will get a sense that what we're doing right now is we're abandoning a culture of getting it right for every child and moving towards a culture of the school as social saviour. And I think in so doing, what we're creating is a culture where we place far too much responsibility on our teachers and those who work directly with children in the one context that's legally compulsory. I think what we're failing to recognise is that if we don't give children richness, they can never acquire wealth. That if we don't allow them to find ways of experiencing beyond Wester Hales, beyond the things that Chris talked about, that's not going to happen. And what we need to do, Willie, I think, coming back to your question, is we need to have an appetite for recognising what we can do beyond and before school. We need to recognise that there is more than one structure, because you can't abandon them. I know that's you in the third person. But you can't abandon folk, Chris, and you can't abandon their families. He's got to learn attachment. I mean, the most brilliant thing about you is that you're able to make relationships without ever having experienced attachment. One of the things that's really, really impressive when Chris spoke tonight was when he talked about the point at which he was at a stage where he was worrying about his brothers. He experienced attachment by attaching to other people, not by other people attaching to him. And that's something that we should really note and really, really hugely admire, that someone can learn attachment through the love that they give rather than the care that they receive. So I think we need to think about how we can structure that. I think there's much to be learned from it, but what we need is a leap of the imagination. And we need to stop substituting activity for genuine action. Getting kids into a formal structure at the age of 2, as tends to be the interpretation sometimes, I think, is activity rather than action. Thinking about what would work for children at that stage and how we support family and children in context, that's action. And that's where I think we need to go with it. Sorry, I feel strongly about that.
Hi, Anne Moore, head teacher at Canal View Primary, and I'm kind of trying to see you here, Chris, but it's not very easy, so I'll just stand up and say hello. Thanks very much for your Thanks very much for your contribution. I really enjoyed and found it really kind of affirming and inspiring, and lots of other words that I'm sure people here share with me. I just really wanted to kind of come in and talk a wee bit about how I think things have actually changed in Wester Hailes in schools. I was appalled when I first went there. My first 2.5 years I've been there, and I went to the plaza. So I had the out-of-body experience walking through that place and thinking, oh my Lord, what is this? And you're right, it was shops that were selling food that I don't know how we expect children to thrive and prosper, you know, in the fact that they're not getting nutrition that's adequate for them. And then it was just betting shops and cash generators, and I found it quite upsetting, and I found it quite depressing, to be honest. Certainly I know that when I was speaking to the children in the school, I was getting things like, oh, I'll be on benefits like my mum. Lots of children saying that to me. I'll work in Poundland, and that was the aspirations. And I know that certainly in the schools in the cluster, we're working really, really hard to raise those aspirations and to use whatever we can get. And whether it's this, you know, money from the Scottish Government that we're all furiously bidding for at the minute, and it's taking up half our lives. It's about trying to find a creative approach to do that. So, you know, we're working really hard to make sure that we're not just restricting the children in Wester Hailes to that. And, you know, in a way, it would be great for you to be a kind of part of that. And I'm already sitting thinking, I'd like to have a conversation with you about how you could actually come and engage with the children in my school and talking to them and thinking about how they can raise that aspiration and kind of move on. But, you know, we have got lots and lots of things that we're trying in school, but it is hard to know if they actually really work, because it's not like sitting a test at the end of it and you tick a box and know that that's been effective. So, you know, it is good to, and you definitely have made me reflect and think, and, you know, it is one of the things that I always do try and do, is have conversations with the children, and things like Place to Be. I mean, we've got a counselling service now in school that is absolutely amazing, and I know that I use it with not just the children, but, you know, crucially with their parents, because I think you've touched on that as well, and that's really, really important. I mean, we can't fix, it's too big for us to fix all the problems of poverty, and I totally agree with what David was saying about, you know, we are symptomatic of that. The life experiences that you had are not caused by schools, but are caused by society wider, and we need to look at how we address the poverty issues, and politicians really need to be brought to heel about that, I think. But I just wanted to say all of that, and I know it's not really very coherent, but you've got me thinking loads of different things. But I would like to have a wee chat with you about, you know, maybe coming in and having a chat with some of my children in my school and things. So thank you so much for that.
And in his official capacity as his agent. Any other questions? One here and then Gillian.
Hi, I'm Patrick Boxall. I run a social enterprise that does learning, really, or creative learning. And I'm really, there's lots of questions actually, but one I just want to say is, what would have kept you in school and made a difference at that key time when you bail on it?
Probably someone, an actual dedicated person who I felt actually did care about me, who actually wanted me to be at school. Like people, like it wasn't just like kind of like I got bullied and I just went, well, nah, I'm not coming back, and nobody said to me, go try and go back, try to get me back. Because like I did have a learning support worker, and I remember standing in the queue to go and see her. And so like and I remember her coming in and I was saying, oh right, you need to be at school next week, we'll try this, and we'll try that. But I always just think when I used to go and see her, she doesn't really care, can't I? Like she doesn't actually she's not really bothered if I go or not. I think if I had somebody there who was really like saying to me, like, you can do this, kind of like really positively trying to push me, you can do this, kind of like you can actually get out of here, you can leave the school with the qualifications you need, and you can get out of this life that you're living. I've had somebody like that in my ear all the time, kind of like almost like a life coach. Do you know what I mean? Not just somebody who's a learning support worker who is trying to like support your learning, because it wasn't just my learning that I needed support with. It was like emotional. I needed somebody there to try and push me over the line. Do you know what I mean? Like now in life, I've got a couple of good friends and things like that, and if I get to a stage where I'm sort of feeling like that and I can't get over the line, they're always there. I can send a text now and they can be on the phone and go, you can do this, just get it done and get over and done with, and the rewards to come will be better than the pain that you went through. If I had someone like that at school, I reckon I could have finished it, and I reckon I could have achieved loads.
And I mean, interesting, that's the message that comes back from every single video and every single piece of work that we've done. We looked after children, and when you talk to people and who cares, where you work part-time, you know, that's exactly what people talk about all the time. It's just the significant other, you know, that person that's invested in your life. So, yeah, hugely important. Gillian first, and then back up to the back.
I just wanted to echo everything that people have said about how inspiring you are and what an impressive young man you are. And just really to think about you, there's not 1 ounce of bitterness or blame in, you know, in just when you've got every right to have, you know, not just ounces of bitterness or blame. You just come across as just so balanced about that and just reflecting on it. It's really, really impressive. My question to you is about Cameron, and you know, we've talked a little bit just before you started about Cameron, and he's 2. And just what do you hope that we might have changed and improved and got better for Cameron? And, you know, what are you hoping for him? To be honest, what are your worries for him as well, so we can try and, you know, get things better and make sure they don't come true?
My worries probably are opportunities. That's my biggest thing I've noticed. Like, even when I was at Children and Families and I was an apprentice, I seen a massive difference in the opportunities that you used to get at Sheen's primary school compared to the opportunities that you used to get at Clonesville primary school. And I say, why is that? They're both schools, and they're both free schools. Anybody can go to them that's in both catchment areas. And I used to think, why I used to go to, and I went to Clonesville school, so I used to hang about up that in the town as well. And I used to feel the atmosphere around that primary school, and then I would be in Sheen's primary school, maybe doing a bit of work. And the difference in atmosphere in the 2 schools, and even the difference in attitude and positivity for even the teachers, because if you're a teacher that's in a school that is, and you're seeing a lot of like deprived children every single day, whether you want to believe it or not, it is going to affect your attitude as a teacher, because it is impossible for you to not be impacted by other human behaviour. So if everybody's coming into your school every day and they're wanting to learn and they're really wanting to, because their parents who are maybe taking them into Sheen's primary school are sitting at night and doing their homework with them and saying, what are you doing at school tomorrow? And asking them. I never, my whole life, not one person ever sat down and done homework with me. And that's not unique. I think if you're in my side of the town, it's probably rarer to find a parents that will do homework with their children sometimes than it is the other way about. So when you're in an area like Sheen's, where you've got a majority of the pupils are getting really supported at home, and the atmosphere in the school is a lot better, there's going to be a difference. So, aye. I lost what I was going to say.
Welcome back. Question at the back. It should be on.
Oh, it's on. Chris, I just wanted to say, I mean, I think what you've been saying is a really articulate, history of where you are now. I'm from a community learning and development background, and I would say to you, please don't speak about your future as if it's in your past, because there's still ample opportunities out there for you to learn and achieve and get your degree and so on and so forth. So if you know what you want to do, there are opportunities for you, and people can help you with that if you need that help. But the other thing I wanted to ask you is, from your mum's point of view, what do you think would have helped her to be the person to help you?
The exact same thing that would have helped me.
A person?
A person there. That's what eventually, in the end, I mean, my mum's now been drinking drug-free for 2.5 years. She now helps other people that are suffering from addiction. She lives a lot healthier and better life than she does now. And the thing that got her over the line eventually was that one person. My mum was the same. My mum sort of had the same sort of upbringing as what I did. Our family weren't really. Our family situation wasn't really good. She left home at 16. She never really had that attachment, like somebody actually caring about her. She was always just caring about other people. And even that was the same right up until we were at school. I didn't even feel. I could a lot of reason to feel anger against my mum for everything that's happened in my whole life. I mean, that's what I've wrote down in that bit of paper is only a minuscule bit, but I'm able to look back and see sort of why it happened. And like, I didn't blame anybody for what happened. What's happened is happened. It's done now. But I reckon the exact thing that could have helped her was the exact same thing that could help me. Somebody to help her actually get over the line and say, this is what you need to do. You need to stick at it. I'm here for you all the time until it's done. I think that's the thing that would have got her over the line.
Okay, one more, and then I think we'll need to give the man a break. And here, Eileen in here.
Eileen Littlewood, head teacher, Forthview Primary. We were just wondering, was there anything that could have been done by schools to help you block out all that interference to your learning? Because when you were in the place to learn, you weren't in the place to learn.
I think that, that's a good point. I think that sorry, I forgot to name the head teacher at Canalview Primary. Like they were saying, an outlet. Do you know what I mean? An outlet to take all that stuff, right? So all that stuff that was in my head, it was always in my head. So see at high school, see if somebody had got me, if I had that person to get me in the frame of mind to actually talk to somebody else, like a counsellor or something. I know that it's hard to get young people to talk to counsellors because there's this preconception now about counsellors and psychiatrists that everybody's there out to get you, when it's obviously it's wrong. But that's about education as well, and teaching them that that's no, teaching young people from a very, very young age that having somebody to talk to you isn't a bad thing. Having somebody to listen to you isn't a bad thing, because that's another thing. We've got quite a preconception. Even as a young person, I probably could have got a counsellor and spoke to somebody because I would not want to, because for some reason I had this preconception that a counsellor, a psychiatrist, or anybody who wanted to listen to the thoughts that were in my head was just out to get me. So I think that probably somebody like that, teach me being able to actually, me not having that preconception and being able to go to school and maybe take a class every week out and speaking to somebody and getting all the stuff that was in my head out, so that my head was clear and being able to learn.
Okay, can I do the thing that nobody else wants to do, and say to you, Chris, that you're not right yet, are you?
No.
And I mean,
Neither
I think
you.
very true, very true. We haven't even begun to speak about my damage yet, mate. Hey, that's a whole different creative conversation. And what I'm trying to get at about this is that one of the things that happens, I think, is that people come in here tonight and listen to you and watch what you do and be incredibly impressed by you, and so they should be. And I've been impressed by you. And, you know, remarkably, despite everything, I'm fond of you. But the one thing that I'm really conscious of is you don't finish stuff. You know, you've started on loads of things, you've gone down loads of avenues, and you haven't finished them. And for me, that's it. That it's having the energy that you've got and that ability to be free from bitterness, to overcome things. But it's that bit that you still need to go over that edge, because the one thing that people need to hear him saying tonight is that his life, for me, is like walking up a sand dune. The ground's always moving beneath him. And you have that sense that if you stop and stand still, you'll go backwards. And there's no sense of security in Chris's life around where he is now, and no sense of security about what happens next week. And I loved what you said at the back about trying to recognise that your future's not in your past. And there is that bit, you know, there's still work to be done, I think. And what I hope out of tonight is that there's something that fairly important happening for you as well. To have a group of God knows how many people in here sitting listening to you, loving you, admiring you, recognising what you've done, and hopefully you'll take something from that and move forward. I mean, I think because it is a creative conversation, I think one of the things that we need to think about is what would it have done to have tapped in to what your potential actually was. Because people are sitting here tonight, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Right. I stand corrected, but, you know, to tap in early enough to actually begin realising it that bit earlier. And, you know, I love that point you make about CLD, that the chance is never yet gone as long as there's a willingness to accept it. I mean, I think that's a massively important point. But it is that idea that it wasn't just about you overcoming your background, it was about you being who you were capable of being. And I think if we take nothing else from this, one of the big things we need to take from it is we must not miss the signs. You know, must not miss the signs just the disadvantage, but we must not miss the signs of capability and possibility for development. You know, I wish you did something like Heather Lucchese working with you, getting you to achieve something in art, as she's done with the children at St Crispin's. Somebody like Eileen that would have tried to bring things together, as we've talked about before, through linking art, linking science, giving children these opportunities, getting that stuff that we talked about, recognising and caring and taking everybody from where they are. You know, that's, I think, the lessons that we need to get from that. And we need to have practice, which allows us the time to see that. You know, we need to have practice, and I think Willie's point's a hugely important one, that often what we do is we implement practice which closes down the secrets of the child, because we're actually planning a curriculum that's planned backwards and not forwards, because the curriculum is aimed at the attainment and the hurdle, and it's not built forward from the child. And at some point that transition has to be made, which is the point that you in upstart Scotland are making constantly, that although that transition has to be made, it needs to come at a point where we have some sense of the readiness, the ability and the capability of the young people we're dealing with. So I think lots of lessons, and I think hopefully one of the things that this has done is it's just passed across some simple messages, which I tend to make all the time. The biggest question is, where is the love? You know, the biggest question in the system, where's the love, where's the care? How do we make sure that every teacher, as far as we possibly can, is invested in the futures of children rather than the delivery of subjects? How do we get people across that particular line? And I think all of these things are about creativity and putting ourselves in touch with our own potential too. I think what you've really done tonight, Chris, is you've really helped with that. I think you've been articulate, I think you've been brave, I think you've shared very openly with us what's really special about you. And it hurts me to say it, but there's a lot that's special about you, mate. So well done, and thank you.